So, earlier this year I covered a demo of the fan game Mega Man X8 16-bit. But I think this was a bit premature since we now have the final version. Or at least a build of it that contains all the levels in a full story mode. Now that it's out, I figured, why not cover it again? If you did watch the first video from May, there will be some parts of this that are pretty much exactly the same, but I'll also cover new stuff and make necessary changes for things that are different between the demo and the final release. I want to make sure nobody needs to watch an outdated video, so I'm essentially just reviewing it from scratch. So, without further ado, let us begin. So this is Mega Man X8 16-bit, a fan-made recreation of the PS2 game and turning it into a game that resembles the original SNES Mega Man X trilogy. If you know anything about my Mega Man X takes, despite X8's popularity amongst the fan base, I was never really that big on it. Once upon a time, it was a more obscure entry in the X series, which gave it a niche appeal, and it also came out after X6 and X7, which are both some of the worst Mega Man games ever made. And I also think X5 kind of sucks too, so that track record contributed to X8's popularity, no doubt. But when looking at the game design, I never liked what X8 was trying to do. I don't hate it, I could replay it if I needed to do so, and wouldn't be upset at my playthrough. But what I'm saying is that I would never seek X8 out for a replay because I don't think the game is that good. For reasons I don't think could be patched like some of the other X games. I've spent time in the past talking about fan-made efforts to improve X5, X6, and X7, and while I'd love to see someone fix my tinier issues with the original Mega Man X8, it is a game where my problems with it aren't that small. You could say the same about some of those other games I don't like, but that's besides the point. Mega Man X8 is the kind of game where I feel like its issues are best addressed by making a new game. Mega Man fan games are nothing new, in fact they're quite numerous. One day I'd like to be able to talk about ones we have gotten, and exciting ones that are on the way. But back to the world of improving existing Mega Man X games with fan projects, this is where fan developer Alysson da Paz comes in. He's the lead developer and a Twitch streamer. He actually is a very big fan of X8 and made the project out of love, not spite. Which is why he said he probably won't be doing one for X7 because he doesn't like that shitty game. What a surprise. But either way, he graced us with a fan-made remake of Mega Man X8. I wasn't sure what to expect when I started playing this for the first time, but to make sure everyone knows, I'll answer some questions I got from the original video. Can you play it on a real SNES? No, this is not an SNES game or an SNES ROM, it's an EXE you play on your computer. With controller support. I used a Series X controller, for example. You can download it from the link in the description. This is the part of the site where you download it from. You have to extract the file from the download, place it wherever on your computer you wish for it to be, and you do all that, and you're right as rain. That's now 2 Sly Cooper references in this video. But yeah, I wasn't sure if this was just going to be aesthetically like the SNES X games or if it would play like them too, and if it would use cool features from the later games. Visually, I was blown away by this game immediately. X8 was a PS2 game that was fully modeled in 3D, but the art was incredibly unappealing in-game. Assets were low resolution and background elements just looked cheap. Models looked lifeless and the whole thing had a drabby atmosphere. Perhaps that was intentional, but I don't think it looked good. Compare Metal Valley from the original to what the new version does with it and it's night and day. This new version isn't some complex visual, it's an orange background with a sun. But I think that pops way more and is far more appealing than the cloudy brown sky from the original. Places where the OG X8 did have color maintain that appeal while making stages like Central White or Inferno look less bland. Like I said, the idea of the game is taking X8 and making it more like the Super Nintendo X trilogy. Thankfully, the art goes far beyond what those games were able to do though. For example, X8 16-bit is rendered in full widescreen. The SNES games only took up a small portion of the screen on a modern display because they're products of their time. When designing a game from scratch in the 2020s, you don't need to emulate that. X plays exactly how he did in the first 3 games, but they were able to add additional frames of animation for X when dashing, running, and attacking. There are also cool details like how if X is behind his or a boss's health bar, the bar will go semi-transparent so you can still see X. So in spirit, it's like those classic games and is emulating their appearance, but is making improvements, and I think that's fantastic. Far too many sprite-based games intentionally inherit the visual limitations from their inspiration, and I'm glad this game is not like that. The game even contains the full story of X8. Cutscene presentation is very similar to the original X trilogy, with dialogue that's pretty familiar if you played the original game, just with parts changed because X is the only playable character here, but I'll get back to that fact later. I'm just setting it up to say that you can still get the X8 story out of this too, or not, because you can skip the cutscenes by pressing the start button when dialogue begins, which is what I did most of the time because I was focusing my attention on the game design. The biggest question for me going into this was, how accurate are these levels to the original X8? I was most curious about that because I don't think the original X8 is a fun game. It gets a lot right. I think it has excellent controls, the partner mechanics are solid, and I like the different navigators you can use. It was a game that had a lot going for it, but I think they dropped the ball on the level design. X8 levels usually didn't focus on Mega Man X platforming, it was instead a roster of gimmicks you'd be forced to endure with mixed results. When playing the OG X8, I always start with Metal Valley, so I did the same when I first played the demo for this, and you get chased by a giant mechanoid at the start just like the original. But right around when I was expecting to do the bit with the switch that leads you to chasing the machine back to the beginning, the mech walked into a giant pit of spikes and blew up. You then travel inside a cave that brings you into the facility where the boss fight is. It was in that moment where I knew I was dealing with a completely different beast. In the following section, you see a sub-tank surrounded by spikes, and I knew there was probably some way to get it, but I tried to get it without dying by jumping into it and air dashing back to the platform. To no avail, because I died. But it was really satisfying, and it reminded me of the excitement of getting the heart tank in Desert Base from X2. Then the boss fight kicked my butt, and after a few tries, I managed to win. My experience with this level was when I had the feeling this was going to be something grand. On this run for the video, I started with Booster Forest, but I thought that Metal Valley experience was worth sharing again because it was so crucial to my love of the remake. X8 16-bit takes inspiration from X8's levels, but it has completely original level design. This is absolutely for the best. Dynasty is a stage where you did nothing but blast the boss you were chasing until he's had enough and you fight him. X8 16-bit takes the fact that this level was all about the ride chaser and builds a proper stage out of it. There will be enemies to fight, dashing and wall jumping challenges, needing to make sure your ride chaser doesn't blow up, and using it to reach hidden secrets like the heart tank and the Dr. Light capsule. It's a real stage now. Inferno was one that had this boring rising platform section at the beginning that wouldn't let you just jump down because that would be an instant kill. Then the level had another one in reverse after the boss fight. I don't like that level either. Now the platforming section's more tolerable since it's not an auto-scroller, so you can go at your own pace. The pipes section is underwater, giving you the water physics to play around with, and you dodge a fire wave for a section and then fight the boss and the stage is over. Much better designed. Central White was awful because you just sat there on a ride chaser for 5 boring ass minutes. Like Dynasty, this has also been transformed into a proper stage where you get these higher and faster routes if you keep your bike from blowing up and can use it to reach secrets. And that's the best thing I can say about X8 16-bit. It never tosses out a good idea from the original game. It keeps good ideas and makes them infinitely more fun, like how Troya Base focuses on ranked challenges. This level is completely different here, but is also about rankings. In the original, you'd have to go through floor after floor of killing enemies under a time limit, but you could quickly clear it with Zero's spinning attack. It was a snooze fest. To get every item, you'd have to play it twice, too. In the fan-made edition, the challenge is that to get to the heart tank, sub-tank, and Dr. Light capsule, you need to get through these 3 rooms with an A rank or higher. To get the rank up, you need to blast enemies and keep the pace up, or the rank will drop like the style meter in a Devil May Cry game. This combines X's shooting mechanics with its fast-paced gameplay, and it's really rewarding to master. Made especially satisfying if you have the arm parts of the Icarus armor, which creates a giant beam that does continuous damage. The level's a lot like Cyberspace from Mega Man X4, only even better. And then a stage like Pitch Black is very faithful to the original X8, but the level's designed in a way that makes it more satisfying to navigate the stealth sections and the parts in the darkness, as you use your special weapons to illuminate the rooms, each one having its own cool looking effect. Booster Forest and Primrose are very faithful to the original game, but it's just been streamlined so much because making these ideas work in an SNES-styled X game automatically cuts out a lot of the fluff that was in the original. Something I wasn't sure about at first was how X is the only playable character in this, no Zero and no Axel. This is because in the original X trilogy, even though Zero was a central character, X was unmistakably the main character, which is why you only played as him in X1 and X2 and could barely play as Zero in X3. X8 16-bit wanted to bring it back to that standard, while being accurate to the original by letting X air dash at default like he could in X7 and X8. I was iffy on X being the only playable character at first, because it is hard to imagine X8 without Zero and Axel being playable, but trust me, you get used to it pretty quick when the game design here is so stellar. The reaction to this fact from the audience really shocked me. A lot of Mega Man fans in the community and on social media talk about this fan game confidently saying they will never play it because they refuse to play X8 without Zero or Axel, and I'm like, seriously? It matters that much? The developer didn't do it out of spite, he merely wanted to focus on X and making him as fun to play as possible and designing stages around his abilities. keeping in style with how the SNES X games played. If you think Zero is more fun than X, that makes sense to me, but I still think X is a fun character to use in every game anyway. I can't force anybody to play this, but it's a fully complete Mega Man X adventure with new levels and challenges. And I feel like a toaster could run this, so why would any content-hungry Mega Man fan not play this? Instead, scoffing at the mere idea of them spending a moment of their obviously busy schedule on an X8 with no Zero. I just think Mega Man fans are some of the whiniest and most entitled people in the gaming community, but that's just me. With these redesigned stages, I thought there was never a dull moment, and I have greatly enjoyed all 5 of my playthroughs. Like I said a moment ago, the game reduces the complexity of the experience, allowing it to do more with X. For example, I thought X's special weapons were all pretty useless in the original game. The X-Buster was so powerful on its own, and you also had Zero and his plethora of tricks, and Axel as well. Now, special weapons feel far more useful since you have less combat options to work with. And then, I was amazed when Bamboo Pandemonium's weapon blew up spikes. No joke, throughout the whole game, this weapon can just destroy spike walls. X8 had a real hard-on for those as well, so it was extra satisfying to get them out of your way like this. When I first got this, I made the connection that this was how you're supposed to get the sub-tank in Metal Valley. But that's when it really hit me, that Mega Man X8 16-bit has an honest-to-God item game. One of my favorite things about the first 4 X games is how you could map out your route of the game according to what gear you'll need to acquire to get all the items in the game and play accordingly. Learning how to tackle the bosses in whatever order it took to achieve that goal. The problem with X5 through X8 is that they kept introducing so much extra crap into the games that made this process tedious or moot. I've ragged on each of these games for that in my various videos on them, but just keeping it to X8, Troya Base was a perfect example. Like I said, you had to play this level twice, because you got one upgrade for getting a high rank on every challenge, but then got a different one for getting a high rank on almost every challenge. So I'd have to intentionally tank my performance on one of them when playing the stage a second time. What intuitive game design. A lot of X8's exploration was just using some tool to find a rare metal that let you buy something in the shop, taking all the satisfaction out of discovering upgrades that were there in the other titles. This new version is the opposite of the original in that sense. I was immediately hooked on it because I was essentially playing a brand new X game with the same appeal as what I enjoy in the first 4, only now I don't know the game. So I had to gradually find my footing by trying different stages and exploring them top to bottom for upgrades and seeing if I could handle the bosses, often getting my ass kicked and being taken back to the stage select. But it was so much fun to get to play an X game like this because I have the others so memorized that playing them is like autopilot for me. Once I started beating some stages and getting some upgrades, I turned the tables on the game and was able to clean house in the back half. It was really rewarding. Something I really appreciated was how you can often get upgrades in more than one way. Like how in theory you get the heart tank in Inferno by using the Thunder Dancer to shut off this electricity thing, but a well-timed jump can get you to it. One must-have collectible is the light capsule in Booster Forest. This gives you the leg parts of the Icarus armor, which allows X to double jump. There are a bunch of ways to get this, and first of them is using the spike clearing method I was talking about earlier, but you need to beat the stage and come back to do it. However, if you have the fire and/or thunder weapons, you can dash over to it. Having multiple ways to get an item opens up the routing significantly. So I've had a lot of joy in experimenting with it, like how the sub-tank in Inferno could be grabbed with the double jump, or how you could use the charged Thunder Dancer if you have it in a set of arm parts. Or the ice weapon makes ice platforms in the lava, which is great. The 2 armor system works like the original where you can mix and match pieces between stages, the Icarus armor being my preference of the 2. The double jump and faster charging speed were great, and so was the screen-wide laser attack. X8 16-bit is full of elements that players can toy around with to see what they like the best. But if I may indulge in vanity for a moment, my absolute favorite thing about the item game in X8 16-bit is that apparently I had an impact on it without even knowing it. The developer commented on my original demo review and said that part of the reason why the item game is so open-ended is because of how much of a focus I put on it in my videos. Apparently, my talking about it so much while also not being a part of the speedrunning community was striking enough for it to make it a core part of the game. And I'm gonna take that shit all the way to the bank. I don't have a definitive least backtracking order for this game because I haven't played it enough to say what I think is the most effective for my playstyle yet. However, the great thing about the game is that there's so many ways to get all the different items anyway, that you really can just do whatever you want for the most part and probably get through just fine. But if I were to think of things I didn't like about this, it's not much. But I can say that I don't really like some of the boss desperation moves, like when a boss is running low on health, they'll do a crazy attack. It was like that in the original game, but back then you had 2 hunters to fight with. I mentioned this in my previous video, and some of them like Gigabolt Manowar felt more manageable to beat, but then others like Avalanche Yeti and Dark Mantis especially felt really difficult to fight and dodge when they were about to die. It's all doable if you got sub-tanks and heart tanks, but with the latter example, I really just don't know how you can dodge this attack. I've yet to figure it out. But we'll see if that gets changed in a later update or not. But speaking of bosses, this game, like the original, includes some secrets. I already talked about the gimmick from Troya Base with the rankings, but it gets even more interesting if you want to see all the content the game has to offer. If you complete a full S-rank run of every room in Troya Base without dying, and jump down this pit, you'll find a secret warp that leads to a battle with Cutman from Mega Man 1 on NES like the original game. It even has a cool SNES-style remix of the Mega Man 1 boss theme. If you return to this point with no Armor X and all your sub-tanks and heart tanks disabled, you can battle against Red from Mega Man X7 in a really tough duel that puts the X7 one to shame. Not that I needed to say that, it was a given, but laughing at X7 is one of my favorite pastimes. Then, if you come back here again with whatever equipment you want, you can endure a battle with Serenade from Mega Man Battle Network 3, another tough boss encounter. I couldn't beat either this one or Red, just figured I'd go over all this secret content for those who wanted to know about it. The endgame was also totally new in this version. None of the previous builds had the final stages, so I was curious how this was going to play out. If you couldn't guess, I wasn't big on the original endgame either. The Jacob elevator was, as the name suggested, a long ride up where enemies kept dropping in. In my Mega Man X levels ranked, this one sat pretty low because there's nothing here in terms of platforming or challenge, it's just a lousy elevator fight sequence in a Mega Man game. This level has thankfully been done from scratch. You start on the ground, and while there are some parts with elevators, there are many portions where you need to do perilous platforming, like any good final stage before battling Vile at the top. The second of X8's final stages was the boss rush in a battle with a Sigma copy body. You can imagine, if you've seen any of my Mega Man videos, that I wasn't big on this level either. I think boss rushes in Mega Man games are some of the most boring to replay, especially with how Mega Man games design bosses, but the developer came in clutch yet again. You still have to refight all 8 bosses, but with a sick new twist. The 8 chambers are still in the room, but they take you to a platforming challenge related to that boss's level, where you grab a crystal at the end. After grabbing 2 crystals, you then fight those 2 bosses together. Repeat until you've done all 8. This is a pretty cool concept because it adds a new challenge to the boss rush, and there's some player choice in picking which 2 Mavericks you'll face together. It's like X Challenge from the Legacy Collection, but way better balanced. Yeah, hell is frozen over. X8 16-bit got me to say I liked the boss rush level of a Mega Man game. Wizardry at work. Though, I thought the ensuing Sigma battle felt kind of like a war of attrition in that he's super powerful and has attacks all over the screen. I just barely beat him. Then I learned another cool thing. If you use all your sub-tanks in a stage, they'll be refilled when you start another one, which is absolutely genius design that I never would have even thought of. It just cuts down the tedium of having to fill them up again. The final stage is pretty good too. I like how challenging this level is with the spikes in both the original game and the remake, so I'm glad it remained pretty faithful. The final boss will kick your ass though. You've got to survive Sigma in both phases of Lumine in one life. I was thinking of complaining about how hard it was, but that's just part of the game. I thought about how I used to think the final bosses of Mega Man X1 or 2 or 3 or 4 were hard, but nowadays I can beat pretty much all of those games without even using a sub-tank once. Practice makes perfect, and this game only just came out. It'll need some time before I'm comfortable with the boss design here. Best thing about it though is that the checkpoint has a bunch of health and an extra life right before Sigma, so you don't need to worry about sub-tanks at all. You get to refill them every time you die. After like 20 minutes of trying, I beat it after only using 3 sub-tanks, and that was really satisfying, like it was when I first beat those first 4 X games. And that's the beautiful thing about this game. I talk about it like it's a God's honest new X game, because it is. In every respect, from the controls to the animation to the game design, it represents all the best the X series has been and then some. I'm not going to say I like it more than the first 4 games, I don't have the emotional attachment to this that I do those first 4 installments, but in terms of design, it's really fucking solid and is a worthy follow-up to the Mega Man X saga. If you're a Mega Man fan clamoring for more content and you don't play this, I don't know what to tell you. You've got a new game right here, and I'm almost confident anything could run it. Special thanks to Alysson da Paz for working so hard to make such a fun game. I had a blast with it every time I played it, and I think most any Mega Man enthusiast would as well. But that's just about all the time we have for today. If there's another update to this game, I'll be sure to spread the word, but I'm guessing this is my last time making a full video on it, which is why I figured I would just cover the entire game in its totality again. But either way, that's it from me. Hope everyone plays this game and enjoys it as much as I do. But in the meantime, Mega Man content is coming on the horizon, so everybody better look forward to that. But anyway, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.